In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world still believed itself eternal, a single choice would seal the fate of millions. Empires do not fall in a single thunderclap of invasion or fire. They lock themselves into collapse through moments that appear ordinary, even rational, until the path behind them vanishes. Across centuries, from the marble forums of Rome to the silent temples of the Maya lowlands, from the frozen steppes of the steppe empires to the industrial cities of the modern age, there have been turning points so subtle that those who stood at them never recognized the door closing. The air still carried the scent of bread baking, the distant clatter of markets, the murmur of children at play. Yet somewhere in the decisions of that day, the irreversible had already begun. The great civilizations of antiquity rose on foundations that seemed unbreakable, irrigated fields that fed generations, trade routes that carried silk and spice across deserts and seas, laws carved into stone that promised order. In the Roman world of the 2nd century, citizens walked streets lined with aqueducts that delivered clean water to every district, while grain shipped from Egypt kept the capital's bread free and plentiful. Farmers in the Nile Valley still measured their year by the flood, and in the Maya cities of the Petén, stelae recorded the deeds of kings who claimed divine ancestry. Daily life moved to rhythms older than memory, markets opening at first light, temples receiving offerings at midday, evenings filled with the low talk of neighbors sharing wine or maize beer. No one spoke of endings. Stability itself had become the air they breathed. Yet the first fractures appeared not as cracks in the walls but as quiet shifts in the soil beneath them. In Rome, the legions that once expanded the frontiers began to consume more silver than the mines could yield, while landlords converted free farms into vast estates, worked by dependent tenants. Across the Atlantic, Maya farmers cleared ever more forests to feed growing populations, and the soil, once rich with ash and leaf mold, grew thinner with each season. The signs were measurable only in the ledgers of tax collectors and the empty storehouses after poor harvests, a slight rise in grain prices, a longer wait at the public fountains, a temple ritual performed with less gold, more clay. But no one understood what was coming next. The collapse did not begin with chaos, it began quietly, in the ordinary calculations of men who believed they were solving today's problem. Pressure gathered like storm clouds that refused to break. In the 3rd century, Roman emperors faced frontiers that demanded constant reinforcement, while the coinage itself was debased. Silver mixed with copper, until the denarius lost the trust of the very soldiers it was meant to pay. In the Maya lowlands, drought years grew more frequent, and kings responded by demanding larger tribute and more elaborate ceremonies, as if the gods could be bribed into restoring the rains. Decisions that seemed prudent, raising taxes, conscripting more labor, building higher walls, tightened the noose. Each solution created new shortages. Each shortage demanded another solution. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late. The system had begun to feed on itself. The critical hours arrived, when leaders, facing scarcity and unrest, chose paths that could not be reversed. In Rome, the Emperor Diocletian divided the empire, fixed prices by decree, and bound sons to the professions of their fathers, locking society into a rigid hierarchy meant to restore order. In the Maya cities, rulers intensified warfare against neighboring centers, seeking captives and tribute to sustain their own courts, while the surrounding fields failed. These were not acts of madness. They were the responses of men trained to preserve the world they knew. Yet each choice closed an exit. The price edicts emptied markets as merchants fled, the wars left fields untilled, and canals unrepaired. The machinery of the state, once a tool of expansion, became a weight that crushed the very production it depended upon. When the system began to fail, it did so from the center outward. Grain ships arrived late, or not at all. Public baths closed for lack of fuel. In the Maya heartland, the great plazas that once echoed with markets fell silent as populations drifted toward the forest edges in search of food. Soldiers, unpaid, turned on the cities they had been sworn to protect. Officials who had once collected taxes now collected only excuses. The daily sounds of civilization, the hammer on anvil, the cry of the water seller, the chant of the priest, grew intermittent, then rare. Fear moved through the streets like a low fog, not the sharp panic of sudden attack, but the slow realization that the structures holding life together no longer held. human consequences arrived not as spectacle, but as the erosion of ordinary existence. Families who had lived for generations in the same quarter abandoned their homes when the aqueducts ran dry. Children who once learned trades from their fathers found no trades left to learn. In the countryside, villages that had paid tribute in grain and labor simply ceased to answer the collectors. Social bonds frayed. Neighbors who once shared tools now guarded them. Temples that once mediated disputes stood empty, while private vengeance settled scores. The poor starved first, then the middling classes, until even those with stores discovered that wealth without order is only delayed hunger. The collapse was not a single catastrophe, but 1,000 private reckonings, each one confirming that the old world would not return. Long after the last official left the empty palace, the consequences continued to reshape the map of human possibility. In the former Roman territories, cities contracted into fortified islands, literacy retreated to monasteries, and the complex web of long-distance trade unraveled into local barter. In the Maya lowlands, the great stone centers were reclaimed by forest, their inscriptions unread for centuries, while surviving communities shifted to smaller, more dispersed patterns of life. Knowledge once taken for granted, how to maintain aqueducts, how to read the calendar cycles, how to coordinate labor across regions, became rare, then forgotten. The turning points had not merely ended regimes, they had erased the conditions that made those regimes possible, locking successor societies into simpler, more fragile forms. Yet the pattern repeated wherever dense, interconnected systems faced resource limits and rigid responses. Later empires would confront their own moments when the cost of maintaining order exceeded the capacity to produce the means of order. The same quiet sequence, warning signs dismissed, solutions that narrowed options, decisions that closed the exits, reappeared under different banners and different gods. Each time, those living through the process believed their case unique, their crisis temporary. Each time, the irreversible arrived disguised as necessity. The true weight of these turning points lies not only in the ruins they left, but in the silence that followed. Historians later measured the fallen in numbers of dead, square kilometers abandoned, years of decline. But the deeper measure is the knowledge that vanished with the living. The skills that could not be written down in time, the trust that could not be rebuilt once broken, the collective memory of how a complex society once held itself together. What remains is the evidence that civilizations can lock themselves into paths from which no recovery is possible, not because the end was inevitable, but because the choices that sealed it were made while the sun still shone and the markets still opened. In the end, the ruins stand as questions rather than answers. The stones of the Forum, the empty reservoirs, the overgrown causeways ask the same thing of every age that inherits them. Which ordinary decision, taken in the belief that tomorrow would resemble today, has already closed the door behind us? The past does not shout the warning, it only records, in the quiet accumulation of irreversible steps, that the moment of locking in often feels like the moment of control, and by the time the lock clicks shut, the key has already been thrown away.